Your pepper plant isn't dying because you're a bad gardener. It's dying because the fertilizer bag you bought is missing one mineral that almost nobody talks about. And by August, you're standing over a plant that should be loaded with fruit, counting 6 sad peppers and wondering what you did wrong. Here's the answer: probably nothing. The bag just left something out. Welcome to Hidden Fix Lab, where today we're looking at a $2 mineral sitting in pharmacies everywhere that generations of home gardeners swore by long before anyone understood the chemistry behind it, and the honest, science-backed way to actually use it, without the exaggerated claims that usually come attached to it. Start with the problem, because it's a real one. You buy fertilizer, you follow the instructions, and your pepper plant still turns pale, drops blossoms before they ever become fruit, and produces a fraction of what it should. Most store-bought fertilizers are built around 3 numbers on the front of the bag: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those matter. But there's a 4th player that barely gets mentioned: magnesium. And magnesium isn't a minor supporting actor. It sits at the literal center of every chlorophyll molecule and every green leaf on your plant. Chlorophyll is the machine that turns sunlight, water, and air into the sugars a plant lives on. And without a magnesium atom holding that molecule together, the whole system stalls. No magnesium, no functioning chlorophyll. No chlorophyll, no sugar. No sugar, no energy for leaves, flowers, or fruit. That's why a magnesium shortage shows up as a very specific pattern. Pale leaf tissue with the veins still stubbornly green, a condition with an actual name: intervenal chlorosis. Once you've seen it once, you'll spot it everywhere. Now here's where the story gets interesting, because this isn't a new discovery. Back in 1618, in a small town called Epsom in Surrey, England, a herdsman noticed his cattle refused to drink from a particular spring, even though they were thirsty. He tasted the water himself and found it bitter. When it evaporated in the sun, it left behind white crystals, and locals began boiling the spring water down to collect them. Within a few decades, those crystals were being shipped across Europe as a remedy for aching muscles. Nobody knew for almost 2 centuries that what they'd found was magnesium sulfate, and that this same mineral happens to be one of the most important nutrients a plant needs to make food. Gardeners in the 1700s figured out the plant connection almost by accident. Some of them noticed that bathwater used to soak sore feet, poured out onto the vegetable beds instead of down a drain, seemed to leave the plants greener and more productive. They had no chemistry to explain it. They just kept doing what worked, and that habit crossed the Atlantic and became ordinary kitchen garden knowledge for a couple hundred years. So why did it fade out of common use? Not because anyone hid it. Because in 1909, a chemist named Fritz Haber worked out how to pull nitrogen from the air and synthesize it into ammonia. And within a decade, the modern fertilizer industry was born. Magnesium sulfate is cheap, generic, and impossible to patent or brand, so it never got a marketing budget. Companies built their businesses around proprietary NPK blends instead. And an entire generation of gardeners grew up believing that feeding a plant meant buying whatever had the biggest number on the front of the bag. That's a business incentive story, not a conspiracy. But the effect was the same. A genuinely useful, dirt-cheap mineral quietly slipped out of most people's gardening vocabulary. Here's the part where I have to be straight with you, because this is exactly the kind of claim that gets wildly overstated online. Epsom salt is not a magic fertilizer, and it will not fix a plant that isn't actually short on magnesium. The real research on this, including work out of university extension programs that specifically study home garden myths, is pretty clear that dumping Epsom salt on soil that already has enough magnesium does nothing useful, and can actually build up salts around the roots and hurt the plant. The honest, useful version of this trick only works if your plant is genuinely deficient, which usually shows up as that pale leaf, green vein pattern, blossom drop, and soil that's been planted in the same spot for years without anything being added back to it. If that's your situation, a simple soil test kit will tell you for certain, and it's worth the 10 minutes before you spend money on anything. If your soil does show a magnesium shortage, here's the actual doable method. When you first plant a pepper seedling, work 1 to 2 tablespoons of Epsom salt into the bottom of the hole, then cover it with a thin layer of plain soil so the roots aren't sitting directly against the crystals, and set your seedling on top. That gives the young plant a slow-release reserve of magnesium for its first several weeks. Once the plant is established, and you see the first blossoms, dissolve 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt into a gallon of warm water, and water it in around the base every couple of weeks. Some gardeners also use it as a light foliar spray on the leaves in the early morning, since leaves can absorb magnesium directly, though the soil drench method has more consistent evidence behind it. For an older garden bed that's been productive for years, and has slowly been mined of minerals, every pepper, tomato, and cucumber you ever harvested carried a little magnesium away with it. Scatter about a cup of Epsom salt across every 10 feet of row in early spring, work it into the top couple of inches of soil, and water it in well before you plant. Keep the dosing modest. More is not better here. A tablespoon or 2 per plant, applied a few times over a season, is the range that shows real results without risking salt buildup. And remember the bigger picture. Epsom salt corrects one specific bottleneck. It is not a substitute for actual soil health. If your dirt is compacted, low in organic matter, and starved of earthworms, no amount of magnesium sulfate will fix that. You still need compost, you still need mulch, you still need the slow work of building soil over seasons, not just seasons of shortcuts. If there's one thing worth taking from this, it's not buy Epsom salt and everything will explode with fruit. It's that some of the cheapest, most overlooked fixes for a struggling garden were common knowledge before an industry built around bigger numbers and bigger bags took over the conversation. Test your soil, feed it what it's actually missing, and be patient with the parts that only compost and time can fix. That's the whole trick. No mystery ingredient required, just paying attention to what your dirt is actually telling you.